Hello, everybody. Cheese. I like cheese. Philly cheesesteak, grilled cheese, cheese dip. I'm a big fan of those. Somebody who's not a big fan of cheese is Jake Steinberg. What's up, man?
Hello. It's true. Anti-cheese, intolerant, some might say.
I'm actually lactose intolerant. Are you?
No, I'm not.
Can we bond over that? No, damn.
IRL, I'm a big cheese fan, TBH. Yeah.
See, I'm also a big cheese fan against my better judgment.
Like, yeah, but cheese is not a fan of you.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's not mutual.
I gotcha. Right.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. So my viewers might be a little familiar with your work because I actually reacted to one of your articles the other day. It was about Pragmata against video gaming, which I thought was pretty thought-provoking. But I guess maybe introduce yourself a little bit to the audience and talk about what you're all about.
Sure. So, like you said, my name is Jake Steinberg. I am a writer. My debut book has been acquired and publishing is forthcoming. So that's exciting. I'm also a creative writing professor at university. And so my background is largely in kind of like academic writing. And
Nice.
yeah, and I also do a lot of like YouTube and Twitch and stuff like that. So when I play games and when I stream games, I kind of like to play them from a like quote unquote writer's perspective. So
Gotcha.
so it's kind of fun going through a game and just kind of pointing out storytelling tricks and kind of trying to familiarize people with the structure of storytelling through video games, which a lot of people I think have not done, and I've found that it is a great tool for getting people to kind of understand formalist storytelling structure within something that they already like really like and appreciate. Yeah.
Cool. I'll say about my background. I study game design, and I'm more in the. I mean, in the program we always called it like ludic games, which is not a word I'm particularly fond of, but like just mechanically oriented games, the very classic kind of golds, win conditions, that sort of shit. But obviously there's like overlap in the terms of topics we cover, and a lot of the ideas are interesting sort of regardless of kind of where you're coming from with your preferences. And it's been the case that on I think your blog is sort of what most people in my bubble kind of know you for, and just every now and again a couple of your articles get kind of passed around, and this one, Deny Cheesing, was a little polarizing in my bubble, actually. I even saw, the great Jacob Geller in your replies saying, disagree, exclamation mark.
Yeah, which is funny because I think I think the great Jacob Geller just fundamentally misread the piece. So
see, I don't exactly recall his wording anymore. Maybe we can get into that. If you allow me to give a quick summary of the article, the way I understood it was, the main thrust of what you're arguing for is the idea of how do we engage with art meaningfully in general. There's some responsibility on the audience's part to think about sort of what the contract is that you're engaging with art. I see you're contorting your face a little bit, maybe. Is that wrong?
No. I'm just curious. I'm interested in how this is going to be described, because I think part of my writing and part of what I'm attempting to do is that I am always curious to see how people interpret the things that I write, because I think that I'm not trying to police what people decide their reaction is, but I am always curious about kind of like what people are drawn to, because the first thing I would say about this piece that I think is important to understand where it's coming from is that this was written from a prompt. This was part of a blog jam, and I was asked alongside other writers to write about this concept of cheese, and the initial prompt actually was to take a side. Is are you like pro cheese or against cheese? And I think that there is maybe a cowardly way to approach that prompt and to kind of fence it and to say, well, I'm just gonna argue the prompt. I'm just gonna say that I don't agree with the prompt at its outset. But I find that to be kind of uninteresting writing. So I guess I find it to be uninteresting reading. So I'm not interested in writing it. And I think, like you mentioned, this piece was polarizing at the top. I think any good piece of criticism is supposed to be a conversation starter. And I think a lot of the kind of what I thought was irresponsible pushback I got on the article was this idea that like I am some sort of video game cop looking to arrest people that are going against my judgment. Because the truth of the matter is that I think from the title of this piece to its first sentence to its ending, it is very clear to me that I am speaking from my perspective, and I am making a somewhat comical judgment. And it's like, you know, I think there are things that people on the internet are very comfortable arguing about. If I make a comment about pineapple on pizza, all of a sudden everybody knows the roles we're supposed to play. Oh, I'm so angry. I hate everybody that likes pineapple on pizza. And I think like there's a degree to which I think people are maybe falling for the trap a little too sincerely and not understanding that maybe part of what I am attempting to accomplish here is by making an aesthetic judgment, making you think more deeply about how you think about games. Yeah.
I did see a couple of people sort of, so you're juxtaposing meaningful experiences versus not meaningful experiences. And then a couple of people that I saw interpreted as like, oh, so you're privileging your idea of meaning over mine. And
I think
I didn't get that, but yeah.
And I think that's the difference between me and them, is that I think me saying I find this more valuable than this is completely fine. I'm not sure where the this like neoliberal offension comes from, where it's like this pearl clutching over Jake doesn't think the way I played this game is, oh my god. It's like, oh guys, you're over there playing your game having a good time. It doesn't really matter what I wrote on jakesteinberg.substack.com. It's this funny thing where I think challenging people on this has actually largely proved some of the point of what I actually wrote about in this piece.
I'll say, I mean, just today I had a conversation where somebody was getting on my case for, I was saying, I don't find this meaningful. And then they really made a point to say, hey, you should say, I don't find this meaningful for me. Like, okay, man.
Oh, see, and I actually, as a writer, I actually take issue with that. Because I think that there is this constant couching and this writing from a place of fear. This, you know, like if I'm reviewing a video game and if I go in there and I say, hey, some people are really going to like this and some people aren't, that's stupid. If I say, oh, this is a great video game, but it's not for me, that's stupid. Like, I'm writing for me. I'm writing for me. It's not about making this pseudo objective analysis of this subjective art. That's ridiculous. Not for me.
I want to challenge you on this a little bit. I want to challenge you on this a little bit because see, where I come from sometimes is like, okay, I have sort of, this is gonna sound crazy, but like ideological principles with games, sort of things that I believe in. Like, I think this is good design, right? And there's cases where I'm like, okay, I'm sure StarCraft 2 is like a great game. I just can't appreciate it where I am, you know? Or like,
but this is kind of what I'm saying, is that I'm reading your review because I'm interested in what you feel and what you think. If I want to read a review from somebody who can appreciate it and can see it that way, I'll go read theirs. I don't want you to imagine somebody who likes the game and then write from their perspective. I'm interested in you.
I agree.
It's not about it's the review is, because here's my thing. All meaning in all art is generated between the piece of art and the viewer. There is no inherent meaning in the art. That is an illusion.
Yeah.
And I think like for us to argue like, oh, it's not for me, it's this, it's here in that way, we are arguing for this kind of objectivity. It's objectivity discourse. It's saying like, oh, well, this game is objectively good, but I don't like it. Like, what are you saying? Like, again, it's this thing that like, for me, I just find that to be uninteresting to read. I'm like, I don't know. It's like every single video game that comes out that has a big budget, I have to read some dumb review where somebody's like, well, objectively, the graphics. And I'm like, okay, it's not what I'm there for.
Okay, this is like only super tangentially related, but one phrase like a friend has dropped one time is like, he was playing a game for the first hour, and he said, you know what? In the first hour, I recognized that the game was great, so I didn't need to play more of it. So now I'm done.
Yeah, that's cool. Like that's
It
cool.
was like
That's
half
awesome.
jokingly as well, but like yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. You can just like see into the future, like Shulk and Xenoblade. You kind of just
Oh
get a
yeah.
vision. You go, I got it. Yeah, yeah,
So to go into the article again a little more,
yeah.
I guess so the one example that you kind of lead in with is, okay, this idea of the type of person that will specifically look up a build and they have like no conception of the experience that they want to have, kind of. And the question I had immediately is like, okay, cheese is also something you can stumble into somewhat organically, right? And I think this is where most of the polarization in my bubble kind of came from. Where do you see the responsibility of the game design in that scenario? Because I think there's like a worry that placing the responsibility on the player for like curating their experience and like judging the experience that they're having, can lead to sloppy design. And obviously, we could cite the great meme, "You control the buttons you press." I have some thoughts on that.
Sure.
I have some thoughts on that, but I want.
I'm
I
actually
know
not really. I'm not super familiar with that meme, to be honest with you.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
So, this is basically, I think this is when Doom Eternal was coming out.
Oh, okay.
And I think they posted like a clip of the ice grenades, and then somebody in the comments was like, "This is so lame. This is not my Doom. I hate ice grenades. What is this doing here?" And then the Doom account replied with, "You control the buttons you press. Just don't use them."
Okay, so I think if I'm understanding the question correctly, I don't think that the responsibility, I like the word you used, to curate your experience. I don't think that really sits with the player at all. So I'm thinking about, there's this John Dewey, art as experience, I think. Yeah. I think that's it. Art as experience. Yeah. Because it's kind of about how aesthetic experience is something that's produced between the interaction. It's produced in the interaction between the person and their environment, rather than something located entirely in either one. And I think that games actually make that relationship, like, they kind of literalize it, because the designer is kind of constructing a field of possibilities and I act within it. So if I like organically discover some cheese, right, some like bizarre strategy that completely trivializes an encounter, that can absolutely become a criticism of the design. And I think like maybe the game failed to protect an experience that it was trying to produce. But maybe the discovery itself becomes like an interesting experience that the game produced. What I'm resisting is the idea that because something is possible, we therefore can't make an aesthetic judgment about what it does. And I'm not asking like who's guilty. I'm not asking like what happened to the experience. I'm just saying that they're like, you can make a judgment over that being good or that being bad, and I don't think there's a hard rule of every single video game should be like this or that. But sometimes you discover cheese and it lessens the experience. It lessens the feeling that the game is trying to produce. And then sometimes you discover cheese and you feel like it was almost this like beautiful accident. It was like this great design that the systems in place allowed for you to stumble upon this solution. But in both of those scenarios, you are interacting with the environment that was put in front of you. It is between you and the artwork. And I will continue to make an aesthetic judgment on somebody who picks up Elden Ring and before they move forward starts looking at a guide and starts saying, you know, it's like have you played Big Walk? This is a new one?
Not yet. I want to play though.
Okay. So Big Walk, you're kind of like running around in this open world and there are all these like little puzzles and you just kind of like go up to them and you solve the puzzle. Yeah. And I think like if I am like worried about looking dumb in front of my friends and before I play Big Walk, I go and I look up a video that's all the Big Walk puzzles solved. I am not particularly interested in the aesthetic judgment of that experience. That's not what I'm interested in. Gotcha. I think that is, I think that is an experience that is like next to the one between you and the game. And I like staying close to the text. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
In the article, you do also say that there's sort of a preoccupation with finishing the game rather than like experiencing it. which ties into what you just said, that I guess there needs to be some intentionality in how we perceive the experience that we're having.
Yeah, it's funny, right? I think like, I don't know how familiar you are with the space, but being in like games and stuff and like YouTube, one of like the most popular pieces of content, like I used to work for a video game YouTube channel, and when a game came out that we had like a early review code for, one of like the most immediate, most pressing pieces of content that we would make is the guide or like 12 tips I wish I knew before I played. You know, it's like, this is a very popular thing. Yeah. And I think in a lot of games, people will be like, well, I don't want to like make a mistake, so I'm going to look up something before I even encounter it. And I think that's kind of what I am suspicious of in that piece. Yeah.
I think the suspicion there is healthy for sure. I guess one maybe nuance to this is that, okay, some art is just hard to appreciate, right? Where one example that sort of came up in my bubble was Capital by Marx, where, okay, it's a pretty dense fucking text, and you're getting yourself some training wheels, right? Approaching it, sort of, you start with an easier chapter, right? You skip the stuff at the start, or you get sort of a companion piece guidebook to like ease you into it. How do you feel about that? I guess with games, the parallel to that would be, for example, okay, you play an old game in an emulator with save states to learn it better. You're intentionally disrupting the experience that was kind of laid out to you, because you have the sense that in the long run you will draw more out of the text in that way.
So I think what is interesting about that example of Capital by Marx is that you're actually not really describing the thing that I think is taking issue there is not the experience of the art, but instead the sussing of the content inside of it. It is, so to me, when you talk about like, well, people really want to understand this book, so they need a guide, they need help, they need that to me is the equivalent of prioritizing needing to see all of the content, needing to get to the credits, needing to know. And I'm just not focused on the knowing. We can all know. If we can all go on YouTube and watch a full playthrough of a video game, but would you say that watching a full playthrough of a video game as an aesthetic experience of playing is the same as playing it?
Absolutely not.
So that's interesting to me, right? Because I think like that is where this kind of comparison breaks down, because now it's like, well, do you get all of the knowledge of Karl Marx's Capital? Maybe you get all of the information, but is there something to the experience of reading it where you read it more slowly, where you have to look up a word, and maybe looking up that word leads you to something? Now we're talking about an individual aesthetic experience that I'm far more interested in, and I think will produce a more interesting person.
I think that has merit. I think that's very interesting. I am sort of drawn to the idea of like, games are systems, and I'm intimately feeling out the system kind of over time, right? I guess for me, if I use sort of if I use a set of training wheels to do that, it doesn't necessarily, in my mind, undermine that. That goal, I guess. And then I guess the question is like, do you value, again, that, okay, I'm becoming familiar with the text and like I'm like, drowning myself in it? Do I value that over an organic sort of intimate kind of experience?
I think the question is most chiefly concerned with what the information does to your encounter. Because if somebody helps me understand Marx's account of commodity fetishism so that I can return to Capital and wrestle with it more seriously, then that means that I think that that is facilitating my experience rather than replacing it. If somebody gives me a 3-sentence summary of Capital and I decide, therefore, I don't need to read it, I think that is different.
Yeah, pretty much agree with that.
And here's the thing: I'm explaining this, and I'm not demanding that you or anybody else agree with me. That's not where this all comes to what I think is interesting.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's why I have a whole part in this piece where I'm like, it's valid. Everybody's valid. I don't care. And it's funny. And it's just like, but I have to have a preference because I'm a human being and I'm not interested in kind of just being this like soft fence sitter where it's like everybody is good all the time. It's like, no, shut up. I like chocolate ice cream more than vanilla, you know? That's it.
Yeah. Maybe getting back to this idea of like controlling the buttons you press.
Okay.
My hot take on that is that okay, I do see it as a weakness in game design often that that the curation on sort of the I don't know the most meaningful or the most rich parts of it is like not there like inherently. That can be true, but at the same time, I can think of a lot of experiences that I've had with games where I made the decisions to control the buttons I press, and I got something very rich out of it. I mean, the obvious example is like, I don't know, like competitive games with exploits. Obviously, the Smash Brothers series, right, is one where, okay, it's very clearly sort of guardrailing you into this like party way of playing, and you have to very explicitly kind of go against that to like get this, in my opinion, much richer thing out of it. So I am a fence sitter on that topic a little bit. Personally.
Yeah. It's funny because I think like that's fine. I think what you so correct me if I'm wrong. I think I kind of like what you're saying is this idea of is pushing back against this stipulation that one obeys the designer. It's like, well, in Smash Brothers, they want you to play a certain way. But you're arguing that there is a much more effusive experience if you kind of defy Masahiro Sakurai a little bit. And I think, you know, it's funny. There's who is it? Miguel Sacart, maybe. It's this idea that play is like appropriative, right? So you take systems in a game and you kind of like make things out of them that the designers never anticipated. So like if you look at competitive Smash, that's probably a pretty good example because the community discovers all of this stuff that maybe Masahiro Sakurai himself was not sitting around and designing. Maybe he was. I don't know. I don't know what goes on in that man's head. But they kind of turn those discoveries into this demanding form of play. And I think that actually supports the distinction I'm making, because I don't think that those players are exploiting Melee because they want to engage with Melee less. I think they're exploiting it because they have engaged with its systems almost in a profoundly deep way. And the like, I think that like wave dashing, I think is one that most people are familiar with. And I think like wave dashing does not eliminate any problems in playing Melee. I actually think it creates more problems and more decisions and more possibilities and more opportunities for expression and mastery. So my standard can't really be like, did you violate designer intention? My standard is, what did this mode of play do to your aesthetic experience? And in this one, I would say it opens the game up, because something that is important to me that I think we're kind of like orbiting in this conversation is this question of intention, of what the designers intended. And I guess I want to be clear. I'm like a very strong practicer of death of the author.
Same.
And for those that are not familiar, death of the author kind of is misappropriated a lot, and it comes up when we're talking about like J.K. Rowling being a TERF, and that's just like not what the concept really is. Though, like, you know,
Harry Potter's still good, right? No,
like no, like inshallah to anybody that's trying not to support Harry Potter. God bless you. You know, like I need one more reason. I never liked those wizard kids anyway. But but really, what Death of the Author is about is prioritizing the experience that one has with the text itself. So if I'm playing Pokemon Red and Blue, and I am talking to the director of Pokemon Red and Blue, and he says, "Jake, you want to know a secret? I designed it so that secretly Professor Oak was a serial killer the whole time. Does that mean that Professor Oak was a serial killer in Pokemon Red and Blue, and I should take that into my analysis? Of course not, because turns out artists intend a lot of things that are not necessarily translated. That's why you hand over the work to the audience, and now we have ownership of it. And what's funny about this is that people do this all the time in video games, because I think in the video game space, we're like a little bit obsessed with behind the scenes and lore and all of this stuff. But then that same director of Pokemon Red and Blue 3 years later could say, oh, I lied. That actually wasn't. Professor Oak was never a serial killer, you idiot. And then you would look like a goofus, which is why I think it's important to prioritize what is happening in the text itself and your experience. And again, why there is no objectivity. Because if we supported this kind of like intentionality and prioritize that, then every single conversation about a video game would hit a dead end, because if you could just get somebody to tell you what it was about, to tell you what their intention was, the conversation would be over. It wouldn't matter what any of us said. So yeah.
I guess what I was arguing for is that I think there is a tendency to judge a game sort of based on the first impression, and like based on the things that are very, I always call this wagon tracks, right? The wagon tracks that are very explicitly for you to kind of put in place for you. And there's value in engaging with a game past that and maybe finding something that you wouldn't have found otherwise. And and that's where I would call this, I'm controlling the buttons I press, right? I'm allowing myself to find things in the game that were that are maybe not necessarily as obviously privileged, right?
Right. And if you don't mind, actually, I think that there's actually a really revealing thought experiment here if we stay with Smash Brothers.
Yep.
Because imagine tomorrow I'm playing Super Smash Brothers Melee, and in my because I am a fighting game savant, I have discovered an exploit that if I press these 6 buttons in sequence, I win the game immediately no matter what. And now here's the question: would the competitive community say, well, it's in the game, therefore this is equally interesting, this is like a good way to play this game? Of course not. I think we all understand that they would ban it. And competitive communities constantly make aesthetic judgments.
This is such a, sorry that I'm cutting you off, but this is such a funny comparison as well, because or a funny example, because the Melee community is extreme to the point of I think remapping the buttons is too far.
Yeah, and it's funny because we don't really question this when it happens, when they ban stages, items, all sorts of stuff, and it's fluid. It's in conversation. Sometimes stuff gets banned and then later it gets unbanned, and then sometimes the meta shifts and the meta changes. And I think the curation of an experience is happening there for the sake of creating the thing that is the most aesthetically interesting. Yeah.
See, another argument that I saw that kind of ties into this very nicely, I think, is that games sort of have a unique ability to enforce a certain experience by being very strict about their scope, right? If you're, for example, if we're sticking with Melee, right? If they had they been much stricter with their scope, right, and said, okay, we're not gonna have dodging in the air, right? That would have immediately eliminated a lot of possibilities. And that's sort of a double-edged sword, right? Because, okay, as a designer, you're getting closer to guiding the player into maybe what you deem is the most meaningful experience. But on the flip side, you've cut off the possibility for them to find something else that's interesting.
Yeah, I guess what's funny to me about that is that I think that I like this idea. Games have this unusual capacity to enforce their own boundaries. Yeah. So if a designer prevents me from air dodging, and maybe locks me into I guess a lot of video games do this, right? It's any action game that you are locked into any specific mode of play, any specific build. Is that the reason that they're doing that? You're playing a character. You only have so many weapons available to you in this level of Uncharted as Nathan Drake. Is that you are guaranteeing the encounter that I encounter the challenge in the most desirable way. But I think that part of games as artworks is that there are constructing forms of agency for us to inhabit, and agency kind of requires possibility. So if the designer kind of enforces the optimal action at every point, then there wouldn't be much agency left to exercise. And I think that sometimes players respond to that in a certain way. But I don't think that the existence of an option means that the designer kind of aesthetically endorsed every possible use of that option equally, because I think part of what makes games interesting is that they give me like enough freedom to make choices that can be like elegant or stupid, but the game's like refusal to physically prevent an action doesn't relieve me as a critic of making judgments about those actions.
I think
so it's did you play that new 007 game?
No, I was like sort of interested in it when it was announced, and then came out and everyone was like, yeah, it's like Hitman Light. I was like, I don't know.
You know, I find it to be quite bad.
Okay.
And yeah, like quite bad. Because I was interested in the Hitman thing actually, and then I was like, oh man, this isn't even close to that.
Yeah.
And part of it is that I think what I like about the Hitman games is this perceived domino effect of you're within these systems, and it's like I do this, which makes this happen, which makes that happen, and then this guy goes over here, and then I do that, and that's really fun. And I actually found that the tools that you were given access to in 007 were to call and response. It was to, you do this, you get this solution, and that is it. It never interacts in a different way. It always interacts in the exact way that you expect. And though you might perceive having a lot of options, because the options always kind of, you know, square peg, square hole, I felt that in a game that wants to convince you that you have a lot of agency, that it was actually making an unconvincing argument. And it wasn't about the amount of choices I had or the amount of choices I didn't, but the fact that I found these choices to be poorly executed. So,
yeah. I guess one way that I often like kind of conceptualize it for myself is that, okay, one of my favorite games is Crazy Taxi, and that's a game with some pretty serious exploitable strategies that kind of trivialize the game, and the community has kind of rallied around it and said, okay, these are kind of things we don't like to see in run, and usually these are the items that where we expect you to say, okay, I'm not going to do this in this run, I'm not going to use this exploit. And I guess for me it's interesting to think about it in this way of, okay, again, they could have cut off a lot of possibilities by designing it in a much stricter and much less sort of malleable kind of way. But I would rather have the game in its flawed state, sort of the way it is, and like have this very unique thing that is so intricate and so interactive, versus a more rigid game, a more well protected game, a more well kind of guarded game that maybe isn't as interesting, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I think like let's say I'm playing a video game and I have 10 options in front of me. Would it be fair for me to say, well, the developers gave us 10 options when they could have prohibited 9 of them? So therefore, the designers must believe that all 10 of these options produce meaningful, equally meaningful experiences. And this is the thing. I understand that this is going to be a tough reach with some people, but I actually disagree with that. I think that the openness itself might be part of the artistic design. They're giving me something to navigate rather than dictating the answer. I think if this is a bit of a crude comparison, but if you think about games that have multiple endings and then there's like a true ending, is the impression that I'm supposed to have that any ending I arrive at is an equally satisfying ending? Maybe not. Maybe the point is that they are saying something thematically by there even being options. Not that all of those options in and of themselves are thematically satisfying.
See, I saw the opposite argument a lot, where the S&T series, I think, is a sort of big target for this sort of thing?
I'm familiar with it, but I've never played this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have to be like it's. I think the major point is like, okay, these games will tend to have a true ending of some kind, and then immediately a lot of people will sort of feel invalidated in their choice. Like, okay, wait, if this is the true ending, and I chose the different ending, like, did I fuck up my experience? What the hell is this? This is stupid. And not really thinking about what it means, just like you said earlier.
Yeah.
What it means for the game to have this series of endings and like how they may even relate to each other, and what it means to be asked to like navigate that yourself.
Yeah, it's funny. There is this this essayist who semi-recently wrote about this concept of ugly feelings that I've been drawn to lately, and I think sometimes people are like scared of ugly feelings, like this oh, I got this ending in this game and I'm like disappointed in it, and it's this idea that like it's not like a negative feeling, it's an ugly feeling. And maybe part of the intention of the game, and it's funny, I think like film has really suffered in the past like 10-15 years or so by kind of being afraid of instigating ugly feelings and kind of always having to have protagonists and characters that are morally sound and correct, and instead of what can we produce by presenting you with something that is maybe going to be challenging, that is maybe going to make you feel a way that is not like satisfying. And I do think that there is something about the gamer specifically who constantly wants to be rewarded, wants to be told that they were successful, that they did it right. And I think that holds us back sometimes.
Yeah. I'm very skeptical of rewards in general in games, but that's a whole topic. I guess to go back to this idea of like having a lot of options. I think one series that implicitly is kind of hovering over your article, but is obviously Souls. And I think Souls is interesting because they give you so many tools that are they're very interactive and they're very kind of immediate to use, and you're kind of left up to your own devices for how to use them: magic, different builds, armor, multiplayer, summoning. And I don't know if I want to say that Souls is like really unique in this aspect, but it definitely strikes me as very strongly indifferent toward how the player sort of interacts with the systems or engages with them. It doesn't really pass judgment on you in that sense. And one kind of interesting experience that I had is obviously in the first Dark Souls, there's this whole dynamic of, okay, when you defeat a boss, you're automatically restored to your human form. And I had this moment where I beat the Iron Golem, went up, the wall to Anor, and saw the summoning signs, and I was like, well, fuck. Okay, I don't know what this area is. This is my first time playing. Do I really want to go in there without without support, without really knowing what I'm doing? So I decided to go for the summoning sign, and the person that I called in, they very clearly knew the level perfectly, and they had like insane armor, and it was this very strange experience of like, okay, I wasn't really struck with the awe and the danger of this area that I think maybe I could have experienced had I gone on my own, right? And it felt like this very weirdly kind of flat, hollow sightseeing tour. But at the same time, that is something that I remember to this day, right? And that, especially because Iron Lando, that's the first time where, okay, you're walking up these like weird little narrow pathways through the windows in a way that it doesn't really feel congruent with the rest of the game's sort of traversal, right? It feels like you're breaking the level design in this very strange way, even though it's clearly intended that way. I think the fact that I was like following a person through all of that enhanced that in a very, very strange way. And again, that's sort of, I guess what I find really compelling is that the game is dancing on this super tight knife edge, right, between possibly ruining like the awe and the grandeur of this new environment versus giving me something really unique.
So I think what's really cool about this example is that I think that this pretty much contains everything I'm defending. So if we think about the aesthetic object that we're interested in, is it the seeing of it? Is it getting to the boss? Is it defeating the boss? I don't think so, because you just told me a story. You restored your humanity. You saw something that you didn't fully understand. You had a reaction to it. You made a decision under that uncertainty. So you summoned somebody, and then something surprising happened. The sicko showed up and annihilated the encounter. That is an experience. So what matters aesthetically is not the terminal state where the health bar reaches 0. It is the development of the experience that got you there. And what makes your story good depends on what you did not know. You did not know what the summon would do. You did not know who would appear. You didn't know what was about to happen. The uncertainty is part of why you are telling me this story so many years later. And I think that the critical distinction here is that you used the game's tools instead of importing a solved experience. So like, think about the something that I'm kind of leaning on in this piece that is a little bit of knowledge that I thought was maybe a little bit too academic for, again, what I thought was a humorous piece. But Gerard Genet's idea of the paratext. He originally kind of uses it for materials surrounding literary work, like a preface, or even like titles and commentary. But the idea is that this material mediates our encounter with the work. So games, I think, have really adapted this concept in a big way because we exist amid enormous paratext ecosystems. So wikis and Reddits and guides and build calculators and tier lists, all of this stuff, streams. And I think what I'm trying to say here, again, is not that paratext is bad, but does paratext mediate how we encounter the text? I think so. And I am not saying that these things are illegitimate. I am saying that they do mediate the experience, because if you encounter a summon sign without knowing what will happen and decide to touch it because you're scared, that is one aesthetic experience. If before the Iron Golem, I Googled the optimal strategy and then learn exactly how to kind of trivialize the boss, and I reproduce that solution, I have had a different aesthetic experience. I think that is undeniable. The question is not which one of these count. They both count. They are both valid. You played the game. I cannot argue with that. Nobody can argue with that. But the interesting, critical question to me is why we have lost so much interest in uncertainty and discovery and decision making. Because one of those encounters has far more of those elements than the other. That's it. That's what I'm interested in.
Nice. I think that's a beautiful note to end on.
Oh, great.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, I don't know. I hope there was something in there.
I think this is pretty good. I think.
Okay, great.
I think this one's a banger.
All right. Lovely.
Do you have anything you want to plug, maybe?
Anything I want to plug? Okay, so I have a podcast called the Critical Error Podcast.
Yes.
And a lot of podcasts about video games, you talk about the news, you talk about the games that are coming out, you talk, like, I don't know what they're doing, but Critical Error is a podcast about how we talk about video games. So oftentimes we are going over kind of not just industry discourse, but how people in our media apparatus respond to that discourse, what kind of language that we use. You mentioned prior that you had read my piece about against video gaming. So that actually was an extended thought from a episode that we had recorded kind of about that same topic. So if kind of the critical language is something that people are interested in, the Critical Error Podcast, new episodes every Thursday morning. Check it out.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Hope y'all enjoyed this. Thank you, Jag, again for coming on. And I'll catch y'all at some point. Bye-bye.
Bye.